It's been a while, folks. Apologies, but I've been moving, as you can see here. New backdrop, new background. It's a new room. But yeah, I just saw Eddington, and man, I think this movie might be my favorite movie I've seen this year. It's definitely my top five. And I have a lot to talk about, but I tried in my script here to narrow it down to some of the big pieces I want to talk about, because I feel like I'm just going to ramble too much. I hope it doesn't come across as me rambling, but man, this movie just had a lot in it, a lot of great things in it, and yeah, man, I just want to talk about it. Let's get into it.
If you value your life, you should think twice, because the of Eddington like guns.
Your pain is not a coincidence. You are not a coincidence. We are not a coincidence.
And I am speaking now to deny my husband's announcement yesterday, which was false.
Eddington, New Mexico, despite its meager population, is quickly being co-opted in online circles.
I'm ready to continue leading our town and fighting the pandemic and the racial and economic.
This is my third Ari Aster film I've seen. I've seen Midsummer and Hereditary. He has 4 movies. This is his 4th movie here. So I have not seen Beau's Afraid. But Midsummer and Hereditary are both films that are highly respected, at least to what I know about the horror community, as being some of the best horror films ever made, at least in the last 10-15 years. And I loved both those movies, even though I've only seen parts of them since my first watch, because especially Midsummer, but both those movies are just brutal, really unforgettable though, and atmospheric, just unsettling horror films. So, and it is my favorite type of horror movies, generally speaking. I like feeling that uncomfortability, but those movies are just so like just getting deep into your skin and into your brain that you have to be like in the right mindset going in, and I just haven't seen them in full since I saw them in theaters. But I really love them. Really love those films. But yeah, once I saw the trailers for this movie, I was just really interested, just from what I like about Ari Aster's other work. But just this seems a little bit different. Not a horror movie. I haven't seen Beau's Afraid. It looks like that one is more of a thriller. It's on my list to watch hopefully this year, to see maybe how I rank all his films so far. But yeah, let's get into Eddington here, which, like I said, from the trailers, I was just really interested. This was clearly a COVID era movie. Kind of looked like a reaction to the 2020 in particular. So I was really excited when we got into it. But after the trailers and actually watching this film, I realized like this is not the direction I thought it was going to go in. Like, I read the synopsis, and it's supposed to be between the sheriff Joe Cross and the mayor Ted Garcia in the small town in New Mexico, Eddington. And I thought that's what the movie's just going to mostly be about, is about them too. But really, it's just about Sheriff Joe Cross. And it's like, we're following Joe Cross throughout this whole film, but, there's heavy political, themes and messages, arguably, throughout the film. But yeah, we follow Sheriff Joe Cross and just his, issues at his home with his wife and his mother. And then also, him dealing with just the regular town folk. And, he looks at the town and he's trying to protect it, or at least how he thinks he could protect it. But there's clearly some division happening, and then obviously COVID exacerbated those issues. And that's kind of where we start with this movie, right? But yeah, it just wasn't what I was expecting going in, that we're going to be following him the whole time. I thought we were going to jump between him and the mayor, Ted Garcia. But yeah, unexpected with the sheriff there, and how, like I said, it was mostly following him. And I'm okay with that. I like that we're in his boots, basically, throughout this whole film. But I digress. I want to talk about the themes and politics of this film, because that's what I've mostly been seeing about this film on Twitter and whatnot. Mostly from leftists like myself. I know putting labels on putting labels on ourselves, which is kind of what it makes fun of in this film. And I'll get into that in a bit. Some of the critiques I saw of this film, whereas it felt like it was shitting on a lot of the left or whatever in this film. So I only saw it very broadly. Like, I didn't try to get any spoilers for this movie. So I went in with, looking out for that. So yeah, here's my thoughts. The whole spirit of this film is a reaction, mostly to that summer of 2020 that a lot of us lived through. Many of us maybe were on lockdown, or maybe still had to go to work, with masks and everything like that. Some folks were in the George Floyd protests. I went to a couple protests myself. And obviously there was the general online political climate that was happening around this time. This movie is a reaction and a reflection of that era, of summer of 2020. We all lived it, and this movie really hit home, I think, and it is similar to a lot of my reflections on it, or maybe I haven't fully reflected on 2020, or maybe, for a lot of reasons. I'm sure other people can relate, where maybe it's mental health reasons, really shitty time that I think a lot of people still are coming to terms with. And so in a way, this movie, I feel like, kind of, really hit home. With that full kind of context, the full theme of just like, not a theme rather, but just this movie being a reflection of 2020, I think we also have to remember this movie, at least to me, is a black comedy. It's not trying to be super serious. Like, it has some serious topics in it, but it isn't trying to not be comedic. It isn't trying to be like, this is reality. It's clearly satire. It's a black comedy in my book. So with everything I'm about to talk about, I'm trying to remember that context in mind, and I hope this all makes sense when I talk about it. So one of the obvious themes in this movie is, the hysteria, especially if you're in a QAnon right-wing kind of online sphere, and even, a lot of Trumpers, right? Like, I'm sure, we all have someone in our family or whatnot that maybe falls into that. Maybe not to the extremes that we see in this film, or at least we've seen it, right? We've seen, especially during, like I said, the 2020, especially with like vaccine hysteria, right? And whatnot, as we bled into 2021. Obviously this movie has a lot of that in it, where right away, we have, Joe Cross's wife there is like secretly watching some, right-wing cult guy, played by Austin Butler there, and also the mother there is also like just constantly talking about what they're putting in these products, or what's happening at the deep state, basically all that kind of stuff, clearly making fun of that and how silly it all sounds, because it is silly. So I feel like that's pretty obvious first theme with this film, which is making fun of the right-wing hysteria. There is, I think, also an element of critiquing the left, more so liberals, but I think there is maybe some arguments to be made for critiquing leftists as well in this film. But the main juice, like I said, is right-wingers, and more particularly the ones that really go down the deep end with like alternative science and watching Alex Jones and the like. There's definitely many chunks of that throughout this film that was really funny, but also I think shows this like, man, remember when that was mostly like an outside thing and now it's mainstream, and how it really started to pick up in 2020, and then it hasn't stopped. The ball hasn't stopped rolling. But yeah, so getting into like critiquing the left, because like I said, I saw some arguments on Twitter saying that this like shits on the left. I don't think so at all. I think there's some fair criticisms. There's also an argument to be made that a lot of what we see in this movie, when it shows left-leaning characters, is how right-wingers see leftists or people on the left, liberals, the libs. There's an argument for that. I totally see that. I think, at least from what I took away from this film, is there's some fair criticisms to be made. So let's talk about that now. So one of the first ways I feel like it critiques the left, and I think this is the biggest way, is, and this is going to be ironic, I know, because I'm a white guy talking about this, who used the term "I'm a leftist" earlier. Like I said, it kind of makes fun of the labeling and like the making it almost your full identity is like, I am anti-racist, Marxist, Leninist, blah 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 blah. I think it does a great job of kind of, and like I said, this is a black comedy, so it's supposed to be funny and almost over the top. I know the world doesn't fully look like this, but we've definitely seen it. If you've been on Twitter long enough, unfortunately, like I have, you've seen it, right? Where people get so sucked into the labeling of, well, I'm this, I'm that, and if you're not like this, fuck off. The kind of, like I said, that kind of labeling that we see sometimes leftists fall into, or liberals fall into, right? Like, the revolt libs that people talk about a lot on Twitter, where, they love Cory Booker's speeches when he'll still vote with the Republicans anyways. It's just that resistant lib energy. And the movie makes fun of those kind of characters. We see it a lot with, like, especially during the scenes where there's the George Floyd protests happening in the town, and they're all peaceful, and of course the cops come in there and agitate it and make it worse, and they're arguing and with each other. And there's one part that really made me laugh, was when they were all there to disrupt the police, Joe Cross and his crew there. It was clearly being escalated, but then one of the organizers, he says like, "Oh guys, we have to kneel. Like, now's the time to kneel." And I've been to a protest where you kneeled for the same amount of time that George Floyd was being held down, being killed by the police. And like I said, it's when I say it like that, it's like, oh my god, right? But it is funny in the sense that, like, all of a sudden the police were like, oh, everyone stopped what they're doing, everyone just kneels. And then there was the one of the guys, like, just saying like, oh, now this is peaceful, like, this is a peaceful protest. And I was laughing during that, because it was such a ridiculous thing, like, to be like, everyone's just yelling at each other. Then the one like organizer was like, everyone just kneel, we gotta kneel, now it's time to kneel. And everyone just settled down. And yeah, it's just funny that the one person like was being like, now this is peaceful. It was already peaceful, obviously, the police being there agitated it, but it was just such a funny scene. So with the protest scene that I just was talking about in mind, this is where one of the other topics, which is I think one of the reasons why maybe some people on Twitter that I've seen got me mad about, but I feel like is actually pretty fair criticism. Or rather, I guess feedback is a better word to be using, because I don't think it's malicious by any means. I don't think Ari Aster is against any of these things. I'm not against any of these things, but I think the movie does a good job of critiquing some of the kind of flaws of identity politics, or making identity politics your only sole politic. I should also add, a good chunk of this part can be attributed more so to purity politics, especially when it ties into identity politics, and the sole goal of being like, I'm the most woke or whatever. But just when I was re-listening to this whole section here, I don't mention it directly, purity politics, that is, by name, but I just wanted to make a note to that, as I think it'd be a bit more clear to what I'm trying to point to throughout this section. So yeah, just please consider that context during this next part. We're not looking at everything from nuanced ways, that if you're only focusing on identity politics, that it can actually be very disruptive or adds more division than it actually solves division. It can be very cathartic, especially, and I think this is where the movie really nails this home, is when it comes from white people who argue they're being anti-racist and like, you know, speaking against, you know, the machine and all that, and they wind up being taking up the entire space, right? And it's the irony of it all, and I feel like it does a good job showing that, especially in the scene with the protest, because it's being run by mostly white people there. I think it was all white people, and there was, you know, some back and forth between them and Michael there, the one black cop, and, you know, it showed that dynamic. But there's also later in the movie, one of the characters is doing a speech at like a gazebo in front of like maybe 10 or 15 people about how like white people speak too much, and he even acknowledges that he's speaking too much, but then he just continues to go on and on and on. But yeah, I hope that made sense. Like I said, I'm not against identity politics. I don't think Ari Aster is either. I think he's showing the kind of way in which it can be more harmful sometimes in certain situations, and knowing the time and place to talk about those things. Another great example is the scene, I forget his name, I think it's the same kid who was doing the speech towards the end of the movie, where he's talking to his parents about how, you know, race is fabricated and like is a way to create division and colonization, and, you know, we need to abolish, you know, the idea of race, and then that way we can start to be free. And then his dad just like cusses him out and says, "You're white," you know, and it was a funny scene. It was a funny scene because, you know, it is kind of, when you take a step back and reflect on that era, I was like, man, that a lot of people were doing that, myself included. And I realized, you know, this movie helped me realize a lot of those little things I haven't thought about in a while, where I'm like, man, we were all kind of doing that, right? Where we're all like trying to speak, you know, and on the injustices of the world, but maybe like, you know, wind up creating more division because of how we're speaking about it. That's not to say we should censor our speech or water down our speech, but there's still an element that was maybe still too divisive. And yeah, just an interesting like reflection I had. And I think I can see why some people maybe got upset, maybe, or feeling like if the movie to them wasn't seen as a black comedy like I have, or others maybe have, that you might feel like it is taking a jab, when I don't think it's taking it is taking a jab, but it's not in the sense, it's not as malicious as it may seem. I think it's really just showing like, hey, like, you know, we gotta maybe think how we go about these conversations, or remembering what is the goal, right, in that conversation, and how do we go about it. You know, being too, you know, soapboxy might be not the strategy. I don't know, but interesting stuff with that. To tie that back in, or tie it together, I'll use like a good example, I think, that's currently happening and shows where identity politics sometimes fails, right? Is, let's say, you know, if you're going to college, maybe your university, you know, at graduation or whatever, we'll do like a land acknowledgement, especially here, like in Colorado. I see it quite a bit at, you know, a lot of institutions and whatnot. They'll do land acknowledgements for the indigenous people that lived here before it was colonized. And nothing bad about those things. But then at the same time, that administration, that university might be behind the scenes, be funding like the IDF, you know, and contributing to a current colonization and a genocide effort overseas, you know, like there's that contradiction there. And I think that's one way you can, I think is a fair criticism of identity politics is, hey, at least the bombs being dropped on us is a woman this time. It's that meme, you know, that meme I'm sure you've seen at some point. Doesn't mean you should be against, you know, like I said, identity politics. Wow, it's a tongue twister. Identity politics. It's just that I feel like, you know, there's some criticism that is valid. And I think this movie does a decent job at poking at those. I shouldn't say poking. I mean, it pokes it because it is funny at some aspects of it, but it does, I think, give a some good feedback on it. In 2025, there's been, I think, meaningful change in identity politics and knowing what pieces to take from it and which ones to maybe leave behind. Another political theme, or rather just a theme that you might see in other films is, and I have seen other folks on Twitter talking about this as well, and I agree with it, is that this movie is about power and how what people will do to stay in power, especially sometimes very, very awful shit, and also how they abuse their power, right? Like once they're in power, how will they keep their power? How will they use their power to get what they want? This movie has many instances of it. I think the easiest example you can point to is Joe Cross, the sheriff there. You know, halfway through the movie, he's trying to get his campaign rolling, and he uses, you know, he talks to his wife about this, but she never really acknowledges that it actually happened, or she doesn't really confirm it, but he goes anyways, and Joe Cross does a speech. This is after the protest too. He goes and does this little town hall speech where he calls, you know, the mayor Ted Garcia a rapist, and that, you know, he ends his speech like that, basically just going straight for, you know, slander. You know, he has no proof of it. And yeah, it's just a, you know, we see that in real life, right? Like, at the same time, sometimes there are actually rapists and nothing, you know, there's no justice towards them. Another extreme example is Joe Cross just decides to shoot Mayor Ted Garcia in his own house, and he also kills the homeless guy as well. He's just abusing his power. He tries to cover it up, right? Because he realizes he can't win, so he's just gonna kill him. He just fucking broke mentally because his wife left him. Also a classic right-wing trope. But another example is I think it was the kid that finds, I'm so bad at remembering all these names, I apologize, but who finds Joe Cross after that big firefight at the end. Amazing way to end the movie, by the way. You know, after he finds him, he becomes like a hero, but like for, you know, on right-wing TikTok or whatever, and he, like, you know, basically becomes a grifter. It looks like he reminds me a bit of like Kyle Rittenhouse. But let's jump to another theme here. So this next theme, also political, misinformation and miscommunication. Those are two different things, but they're both also, I think, in the same kind of spectrum in a way, both on a personal level and a political and social level, because throughout this movie there's plenty of misinformation, just straight up with like what the mother is listening to there, I think her name's Dawn there, is listening to on her, you know, her podcast or whatever, or what she's reading in the news. And then you have the misinformation that Joe Cross is giving out about what the law can and can't do, or like I said earlier, he calls Ted Garcia a rapist. And then there's the, you know, misinformation about like COVID guidelines that everyone's arguing in this town of who actually, if there even is guidelines, and if they are, who can actually enforce it. You know, there's some misinformation there. But that misinformation and tied with miscommunication. Joe Cross clearly can't communicate with his wife and Dawn there. He struggles to communicate with a lot of people in the town, even if he means well. So those are some of the main themes I picked up on, or rather just quickly wanted to talk about. Hope it's been quick. I'm looking at my recording. It says 47 minutes, so hopefully I've chewed it down a little bit more. But yeah, so those are some of the big themes there. You know, there's also, I guess, a theme of like violence and political ideologies, and kind of the maybe American unfortunate part about being in America, right, is this tendency for violence and just, you know, that's being the first reaction maybe to things. I don't know if I can kind of see that theme throughout. I think it's also just makes the movie more interesting to have, you know, like I said, it's a black comedy and having that satire of over-the-top violence. But I can see some of those angles. But yeah, I found most of the film, you know, like I said, satirical, and you know, I don't think it's the main message of the film to be, like I said, anti-left or anything like that. Oh, before I forget though, speaking of anti-left, I can see where, once again, if someone didn't see this movie as satire, the big like Spec Ops Antifa group that comes at the end was freaking hilarious. Just like, I'm like, yeah, this is what a lot of right-wingers I feel like think exists, that there's some like paid for super Antifa group that flies on a private jet to different places and like kills cops and takes out political leaders or whatever. I don't know, but really, really funny. But I feel like, once again, that's making fun of the delusions of right-wingers rather than saying the left does this and we should look into it. Yeah, I really loved the Spec Ops, like just that whole third act where it just starts getting crazy. Actually, while I'm here, because I originally had it later in my script, but yeah, cinematography, especially during that third act, like I said, with the kind of gunfight with Antifa Spec Ops folks there. I really love that, like especially once he gets the freaking minigun and he's just blasting. Just really good shit. I just really loved how the camera would shift with him when he was, you know, turning left to right to like clear a corner or see what was behind him. Just really good shit. But cinematography overall, like I love New Mexico. I've been there a couple times, and living in Colorado here, and it's one of my favorite states I've been in. It's just so pretty, and like it is just like a Western movie where you have the like the flat desert plains kind of throughout, but then you have the big mountains in the distance and whatnot. But they did a good job of it really feels grounded in New Mexico there, and I just love the desert landscapes and the hills and whatnot. Just looks really, really pretty as well. Color grading was really, really good. Yeah, I just love the setting. I love that it's in the small town in New Mexico. Really, really good idea to just have it there and not have it be like, I feel like it wouldn't have worked if it was in like New York City or something. I think they picked a good location to tell this story. But yeah, cinematography great. Location setting, fantastic choice. Hell yeah, New Mexico. But to start wrapping this up here, like, yeah, there's just so many great moments. I can go on and on. I feel like I already talked way too much about this film's themes, but like, there's so many scenes that like this movie doesn't stop. Like, and the pacing's good. It's not like too quick either. It's like they let scenes breathe when they need to. It is chaotic when it needs to be chaotic. It is a trip. Like, and shout out to the audience in my theater when we saw this, because, you know, it was just like, it helps. I think it just made the movie even more engaging because, you know, we were all laughing, you know, at parts that were funny, or being like, oh shit, you know, when Ted Garcia gets assassinated, like I think it caught the entire crowd off guard, but like we weren't expecting that. So it was, just like those moments where you're like that's where, man, I love the theater, you know, because it adds to the movie where like you can react with everyone. Actually, it was funny is a guy went up to go to the bathroom, like right before Joe goes and kills the homeless guy and Ted Garcia. Like he left for that whole time and he came back like after all that. And I'm like, dude, you missed like arguably like the biggest part of the film. Not arguably, is the biggest part of the film. I'm like, this is not a movie you can go up and go to the bathroom in. Like if you're watching this at home on streaming, like you gotta pause it, right? Because it's nonstop. You can't really miss a moment in this movie, and I think that's another reason why I like this movie so much is like I said, everything breathes when it needs to breathe, and everything moves quick when it needs to move quick, and it just creates this crazy energy with this film, and it fits with, like I said, the kind of overall reflection of 2020. Like, that's how 2020 felt. It was both boring because you're sitting at home a lot, but also most chaotic because so much shit was happening. It felt like the world was ending at moments, or things were coming to an explosion or something, right? It was just a lot going on, and I think the movie, its pacing fits that so much. Amazing cast too, with amazing characters. Once again, like I think having this in a small town with, you know, not having, you know, too many characters, but just enough. I think it was a good amount of characters. But yeah, Joaquin Phoenix, great. Pedro Pascal, great. Deirdre O'Connell, great. Even though she's not a main character really in the big scheme of things, like, just she like got the whole like QAnon crazy lady thing down like pat. Like, it was really, really good. But yeah, I mean, the whole cast was great, and from the small characters, small roles to the big roles. And yeah, Joaquin Phoenix did a really fantastic job. I really liked him in this role. It's different from the other movies I've seen with him. I haven't watched too many of his movies, but I've watched quite a bit. So just to see him kind of do a different role, but I always know he's one of those kind of guys who will do anything. You know, the Joker. But you know, I always think of him as from Gladiator there, what's his name? It's Commodus or whatever. He's the freaking king, whatever he is, emperor. But yeah, it was good to see him in this kind of role. And I hope to see Beau is Afraid, like I mentioned in the very beginning, because I know he's in that. And you know, same kind of, and you know, same crew working together. So I need to see that movie. Let's rank this film, wrap it up here. 5 stars. You know, just gotta lock that in. If it's gonna be in my top 5, if not number 1, I think it's easily 5 stars. 5 out of 5. I'm gonna put that on my letterbox, which I'm slacking on doing right now. I need to do that. Now, where do we put it on a S rank scale? S through F here on a movie scale. So to me, Dune Part 2, the first thing that comes to mind is something that's recent-ish that I would put in S. S being perfect, you know, maybe arguably, you know, an experience, something that like moves me. And, you know, this movie doesn't move me like Dune Part 2 did, but did make me, like I said, reflect on 2020. And I feel like this movie was just so fun. Comedic, but also just had a lot going in it. And I mean, you know, it's, you know, all these rankings don't matter. It's not like you know, they get a prize or something at the end. You know, it's all for fun. So screw it. Let's just put S rank on this. Why not? You know, it is, I think, a memorable movie, and I think it's a movie I'd rewatch. If anything, I'm going to look for a steelbook for this, I think. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. Yeah. Let's put it in. Let's put it in. S rank, 5 stars. Lock it in. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope this all made sense. Go watch Eddington in case you didn't watch it already. I know I spoiled a lot, but go watch it if you haven't. And try my best to put up these videos. You know, Ethan and I on this channel are very busy. We try our best to do what we can do. I'm hoping now I've moved, things will settle down a little bit so I can maybe put out a little bit more. So we'll see. But thank you all so much for watching. And if you like this video, give it a like. If you want to subscribe, do that too. We do a lot of movie reviews on here, specifically video game movies. I do my own movie reviews on here occasionally, like this one. We have a lot of fun streams, both video games and game shows and goofy stuff on here. Hey, if you like this movie and its chaoticness, you might like this channel and its chaoticness. So, you know, give us a shot, go check it out. But hey, if you watch this. Appreciate it. So have a good one, and see you at the movies.